He's been on before. You guys are probably familiar with him. He was also not on for a while because he was a senior advisor and speechwriter for Bernie Sanders. So obviously the campaign is over, and he is now coming back on to talk about certain things from his own perspective. So, David, I give that intro because there's a lot of folks in the Bernie world who have differing views on the task force that Joe Biden announced recently. And there's nothing more normal than that. Everybody doesn't have to have the same opinion. And you've called the task force performative and, seem to indicate that it's not very useful. And I'm actually soft pedaling it, having read what you've written. Okay, so let's dive right into that. Why are you so skeptical about the task force?
Well, because I think that Joe Biden knows exactly how to explain to us where he is and where he's not on various issues. Task forces presume that that we need to understand or litigate and negotiate a complex set of issues about where the nominee is on specific issues. What does the nominee support? What does the nominee not support? But we don't suffer from a lack of ideas, a lack of legislative initiatives. We suffer from political will to get those initiatives done, and we suffer from politicians who don't make clear about where they actually stand on the issues. So when I hear Joe Biden say, I need task forces to come up with policy prescriptions or to come up with some sort of unity agenda that we all agree on, what I hear is somebody who doesn't want to make all that clear where he actually stands. Somebody who wants to have the image of looking like he's reaching out for consensus in the Democratic Party, and is going through the motions of a process, but isn't actually giving up much ground or conceding much of anything. And I'll make it very concrete here. I mean, Joe Biden can be clear about whether he supports Medicare for all or not, and why he does or he doesn't. And he has said, actually this week, he's been very explicit, saying he doesn't support Medicare for all at all. And so he has a healthcare task force full of some Medicare for all proponents. And so clearly he knows that the exit polls in the Democratic primary showed very strong Democratic support for the concept of Medicare for all. He also knows that he's answering to his healthcare industry donors by opposing Medicare for all. So he's created a task force to try to square that circle, but it's not really a fixable situation. The image of it may look like there's consensus or that he's trying to reach some form of consensus, but frankly, it's a binary issue. You're either for Medicare for all and a healthcare system that guarantees healthcare to all Americans, or you're for a corporate-run health insurance-based system run by private corporations that doesn't guarantee healthcare to all. And I don't care what kind of task force that you have to try to distract from that or pretend that situation doesn't exist. That's the facts. It's a yes or no question. You either support doing what we know we need to do on climate change to stop that catastrophe from being as bad as it possibly can be, or you're not for the serious measures like a Green New Deal to address climate change. We don't need a task force to pretend like there's some middle ground. And my point is not that it's a bad thing for the Democratic nominee to reach out to all parts of the party. My point is the reason why you have task forces or blue ribbon commissions, the reason why they've become such a cliche about not really doing anything is because those are the vehicles that have been used for decades to try to distract us from whether or not a politician is really taking a stand with us or against us.
So, David, let me push back on that a little bit. So, and by the way, I'm in neither camp here. Some people love the task force, some people hate it. I'm mixed on it. So, for those of you who aren't familiar with all the names on the task force, the reason we're having a conversation about it is that if Joe Biden had put on a task force filled with establishment figures, that would be very normal. and it would not be newsworthy. It'd be like, okay, they're going to figure out how they're going to screw us, and we're done with it. But he did put a lot of real progressives on there. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Stephanie Kelton, and in the case of Medicare for All, Abdul El Sayed is on there, and he's very progressive and definitely in favor of Medicare for All. So, but the pushback comes in this, David. Not that they're on there and period, and we could, and good enough, but that maybe given the circumstances, given that our side lost and they won, that maybe there are some extractions that we can get that would make a difference. So Biden came out of the gate by saying, okay, fine, I don't like Medicare for all, but I'm willing to go to Medicare starting at 60 instead of 65. So I think that's weak sauce, not nearly enough. And so it's not reaching out much. So just because you're reaching out doesn't mean it's enough. Or, what if he had said 64 and a half? Okay, so it's not reaching out by much, right? But for example, if the task force collected and then they said, you know what, any person born in America should automatically be enrolled in Medicare. So not everybody gets it right away, but new people called babies, they get it, etc. Would that be something that's interesting?
No, I mean, I'm not making. I want to be clear. I'm not saying that the people involved in these task forces are wrong to engage with the process that the Biden campaign has set up. The folks you mentioned, they are great progressives, and I think they should, if they were invited to be part of this process, they should be a part of this process. My point is a larger point, is basically, let's not cheer on a process that we know is the kind of process that has been used to mollify actual pressure and demands for concrete actions. Let's not just cheer on that process. Let's not give Joe Biden a lot of applause and pretend that simply having task forces is something real. If Joe Biden rolls out a policy that is real, if Joe Biden makes a set of commitments that he is prepared to follow through on, that is an actual real step. That is the thing that we should be focused on. But my point is only that we shouldn't simply say, okay, Joe Biden's bringing in some people that we like, and that unto itself is a huge victory. That's not a huge victory, because we know that the Democratic Party has used that kind of process to try to pretend as if it's doing something when in fact it often doesn't do the things that it's pretending to do.
Right. So do you know when the task force is supposed to conclude policy suggestions, before the election or after the election?
I'm not so sure. I don't know, but I can say this. I think we need to be watching very carefully what comes out of these task forces. And I think we also need to be watching very carefully if the people on them are willing to speak out and be honest with us about what they may have, what concessions they may have extracted and what concessions they may not have been able to extract. My point here is that I really think that we're living in an era of politics where we can't just be honest anymore, and that people feel so tribally aligned with their party that we can't actually be honest that about nuance here. And when it comes to a candidate like Joe Biden, look, I've said it before, I'll say it again. Joe Biden is better than Donald Trump. Joe Biden also has a pretty bad record when it comes to lots of progressive values. Joe Biden has been a real opponent of progress when it comes to, something like Medicare for all, when it comes to lots of issues that are important to working people. I mean, this is the guy who was the author of the bankruptcy bill that will crush people and help the credit card industry crush people during this recession. And my point is, we should be able to be honest and acknowledge all of those things. Better than Trump, bad record, needs to be pushed. If we are not honest about those kinds of things, then we will end up in a situation which I think was a bad situation, like we were after the 2008 election. After the 2008 election, Barack Obama won, and there was a sense that since the election had been won, that was it, the problems would be fixed, we can all go home, and we can all just cheer on the new president. My point is that Donald Trump needs to be defeated. But if and when Donald Trump is defeated, the day after the inauguration of the new president, We need to have been honest with ourselves about what kind of president is going into that office, and we need to be prepared to actually seriously push that president and not defer, not back off, not say, oh, the new president deserves, honor and our worship just because they won the election. We need to be prepared to actually be mobilized when that happens, and part of that process of being prepared to be mobilized is being honest with where we are now. Yes, we lost. Task forces unto themselves are not a victory unto themselves. Actual concrete things in the world, like commitments on policy, are what we need, and we need to be honest about when we get them and when we don't.
David Sirota, and right now you're doing a newsletter, TMI, right? How can people sign up?
You can find it at my website, davidsirota.com. You'll click to a link right there.
Thanks for watching this free clip of the Young Turks. Don't forget to become a TYT member today. For more exclusive content, join now at tyt.com/join.